So, welcome to a truly special milestone episode. We're here today to celebrate a remarkable achievement. It's our 100th consecutive podcast episode. It's awesome. So, this is no ordinary moment. So we're breaking from tradition. This time, I'm going to be your host, and I'm Stefan Levin. I'm the CEO and founder of Data Talks. But the star of the show today is our exceptional guest, and she does a really grand introduction. So, a few words about Lorraine. Every time you encounter her, she brings a genuine, warm smile that lights up the conversation. She's just a great listener. She's an active, engaged participant, offering feedback that doesn't just critique, but truly improves. She is the embodiment of hard work and dedication, a leader with unwavering focus and an open-minded spirit. So I want you to meet the driving force behind our communications and PR here at Data Talks. She's not just confined to the world of business. She's also the driving force behind Data Talks initiative, Women in Sports Beyond the Hashtag, championing positive change and inclusion. Oh, and you might remember her as the voice behind the captivating 99 episodes of the Sports CDP Crash Course. So, big shout out to the one and only Lorraine.
Thank you so much. That was an introduction and a half. Almost got teary-eyed. Thank you so much for interviewing me.
Yeah, this is it's always when you get into new situations, it's always a little bit nervous. I mean, you're used to being on the side that I am on, not being the subject of the interview.
Absolutely, and I guess as well, this is a special episode in the sense that we're celebrating, but also at the same time, I think human beings were just really bad at celebrating, or maybe it's just me that's really bad at celebrating. So now I'm trying to take in what you just said instead of kind of sort of focusing on just getting the episode done.
Exactly. You should take that in.
Yeah.
And now, so I'm not used to being the podcast host, right? So we've already sort of gone away from the agenda, because what we usually do before we begin is that we start with an icebreaker. Right?
Yeah.
Are you ready for the icebreaker?
I am ready.
All right, good. Okay, so what's your favorite quote, expression, or motto, and why is it your favorite?
This one, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's my favorite right now. You know, sometimes you stumble upon something and then it makes you think. And I had to write it down because I wanted to get it properly. And it's: life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the experience you're having at the moment. And it's by Eckhart Tolle, and he's a spiritual teacher. And it's just basically about, I think most of us, we're really good at planning for what we want in the future and underestimating or not appreciating the situations that we find ourselves in, whether that's a good situation or something that we think is good or something that we think is bad. So I'm trying to come to peace with every single thing, every single area of my life, even the things that I'm trying to improve, and understand that those are learning moments. Those uncomfortable moments are there to serve me versus trying to sort of bypass that and run off to the sort of the destination. So it's kind of echoes that saying, it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey as well. So that's my favorite quote right now.
It's a good quote.
Yeah.
It is, and maybe it connects a little bit to, you were saying that it's sometimes hard to celebrate, right? Because celebrate something, or actually learning from your failures, because we have those as well, right? And the key to that is living in the moment.
Absolutely. And I am reading a book called, and it's by the same person, Eckhart Tolle, and it's The Power of Now. So just living in the moment. If the moment calls for a celebration, can you celebrate and celebrate with your whole heart? If the moment calls for a tough conversation, can you have that tough conversation with as much compassion and as much open-mindedness as you can? And it's I don't think anyone can really say, yeah, I live in the moment 100%, but I think it's a spectrum, and I don't think I'm quite there yet. So that's what I'm trying to work on.
Fantastic. I can very much relate to this. It's so easy that you just rush to the next thing and to the next thing and the next thing, and you don't stop and reflect, which I think is like it's important. Whether it's good or bad things, you need to
Absolutely.
stop, reflect, and like learn and celebrate. So great quote.
Mm.
Great quote. All right. So thanks for that. Let's jump in to the podcast then. So since we are recording this special episode today, it's also a little bit of a double celebration. It's not just the 100th podcast episode, but we're also commencing your second anniversary with the Data Talks. So that began on November 15th, actually, in 2021. So as we reflect on both of these milestones, maybe I'm curious to hear more about your journey. Do you recall your first day here at Data Talks, and how did it feel to step into this role?
Yeah, I mean, my first day was a mixture of, was virtual, right? Because I was still living in Lund, which is 5 hours away from Stockholm. And so
I remember now.
yeah, I think it was a mixture of everything. Firstly, what is a CDP? At the time, I was I don't know what I'm going to be working with, and I had read so much in preparation for my interview. But then it's one thing to prepare for just a one-off event of like it's an interview and then that's done. But now it's like, how am I going to do this job? So it was excitement to prove myself as well, I guess, because I'm the kind of person I don't want to ever make someone feel like it was a mistake to bring me on to something. And so I was like really eager to prove to something that she did the right thing by hiring me. But I was also afraid because I was like, what do I know? You know? And as well, like the sports side of things. I grew up in a very sporty environment, which is something that I'm recollecting now, because before I was like, I wouldn't have said that. But I grew up in an environment where Sundays were all about sports on TV. So we were watching that. And in school, you had to do sport and there was an elimination process. So it's like you try first and then you get eliminated versus you opt out. And so, like I said, I sort of tuned that past or that side off because it was never an interest of mine. And so now to get into the sports context, I really had to dig deep and I really had to sort of be open-minded and learn. And it has been such a rewarding experience. So it was a mixture of everything is the answer to that question.
Fantastic. And since you're mentioning like the learnings and the experience that you gained during this time, can you share maybe some of the most significant ways that your work at Data Talks has contributed to your own growth and your development?
I think when it comes to my growth, honestly, it's the thing that I've learned most at Data Talks has been my attitude and how I face things, my mindset and all those things. Because when I first started at the company, I was a very fearful person. I'll still say that I'm working on it, but there's still a hint of that. And it's just life, you know, certain things trigger certain emotions. And for me, the emotion that I felt a lot was fear throughout like my childhood and things like that. And so I was quite fearful, very afraid of putting myself out there, very afraid of pitching ideas because if it goes wrong, then everyone's going to look at you and then blah, blah, blah. So just this very fear-based everything. So everything that I did, even if I did it well, there was a lot of fear involved in that. And I think that one of the biggest lessons I've learned is really to trust myself a bit more, you know, because you don't get to 100 episodes without actually being consistent, without being creative, without being strategic, all those different things. So having that builds sort of this evidence of I can do this has really been helpful. And also just learning to not be so terrified of first, because I remember like my first big thing ever in life was moving to the UK. And that was a terrifying experience because of the immigration, the rules, the laws, and all those things. So then my attitude towards a first time doing things has always been sort of like, things are going to go terribly wrong. But I remember when we did our first LinkedIn Live event, when you were there as well, that was one of that was so terrifying because I was like, could go wrong. And at the time, Dionysius, who's on my team, or I'm in his team, he was also afraid because he had an experience where they wanted to do an ambitious project and then it didn't go so well. So both of us were terrified. But I remember just being like, okay, this is terrifying, but we're going to learn to appreciate first. We're going to learn to appreciate that just because it's the first time we're doing something doesn't mean it'll go horribly wrong. It might surprise us and it'll go very, very well. So I think that entire attitude mindset is the one thing that I can really say I've really benefited from Data Clause.
Now this is very, very interesting that you're saying this, because and now I'm totally going away from the script.
That's okay.
But I want to pick up on this, because you're saying two things. You're talking about learning, you're talking about the first time to do it, and you're also mentioning like the fear-based or the fearless that you need to achieve. Mm-hmm. And I think like being in a startup, scale-up environment like Data Talks is, or was and still is, it's quite demanding. But it can also be extremely rewarding. Like it is demanding from exactly what you're saying. It demands that you do things for the first time. It can be the first time for the company, or it can actually be both. First time for the company, first time for yourself. Yeah. So that is a big challenge. And I think that few who haven't been in that environment can really understand what that really demands from you, right? Yeah. So the only way that you can approach that sort of environment, or actually, this is going to sound harsh, but survive, is that you sort of get rid of your fears, and that you actually take on the challenges as learnings. Absolutely. But it's not done like you just decide one day and hey, now I'm fearless. Now I'm just taking on my challenges as learnings. It's a process, isn't it?
And I would say it's a daily process, because the thing is, we are human beings. I'm obsessed with like human beings, that term, if it comes across.
Well, we are.
We are human, and it takes, you don't know what might trigger you. You don't know what might make you sad or what might make you happy. And you don't know that thing is going to happen that day, right? So every single day I try to, when I wake up or before I come to work, I try to go, today I realize that I'm still fearful, but I'm less fearful than I was yesterday. And so I set that intention of, if somebody says something that I don't understand, instead of jumping to conclusions and going, oh, this person is out to get me, I will investigate and ask and try to get to the bottom of what they're saying. So making it about them, since they're the person that is bringing this forward, versus making it about me. Because once I go, oh, now you're hurting me, we're moving away from the conversation at hand, and we're moving to me, right? So it's just daily trying to be like, okay, I might have an uncomfortable conversation today that I don't want to have, but I'm going to remain open-minded. I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I'm not going to let fear take over. And Brene Brown, she works a lot with she's a researcher, and she works a lot with shame, with fear, with perfectionism, which is a very bad thing, because it's really based in fear and trying to hide the fact that we're vulnerable people. She talks about just oops, I lost my train of thought there. Setting intentions. What was I saying? See, this is why I'm always on the other side, because I'm the one that listens.
Well, maybe this is actually a very good example. I think this is a very good example, because this happens to everyone, right? Yes. You lose your train of thought, and it can happen anytime. I remember one time, and you were there. Do you remember at Spogus? It's a huge, like this sports conference in Germany. Yeah. I don't know, it was like maybe 150, 200 people in the crowd, and I was on stage. I totally lost my train of thought.
I remember.
And it lasted for way too long. Like maybe that's how it felt. It was like 30 seconds, 1 minute. I did not know what I was about to say next. Yeah. And I remember that you were in the audience. You knew what I was going to say next. And so did August. And he worked here previously. And he said like he was about to shout out the next word just to get me started. Yeah. Eventually, I picked it up, but it's like
it happens to the best of us.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I'll probably remember at some point because I completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
happens.
it
It
happens.
happens.
It happens.
I think it's a good display of like you can react to that in so many different ways. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, so now,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So maybe this is a learning, stick to the script. All right. So if we just continue down memory lane just for a minute here, I'd love to hear about some of the experience that have left like a lasting impact on you. So what are the most, or maybe one or two most rewarding moments that you've encountered during your time here?
I would say that most of the rewarding moments that I've encountered at Data Talks have one thing in common, and that's that I have an amazing team that I'm working with, and everything ties back to that. So when we think back to when we were writing the book, like just amazing collaboration on that side. Dionysius, I mentioned him the second time, but he's the chief growth officer here, and he's just amazing. Like I remember, I mean, firstly, Santi, she's the one that took the leap and hired me and believed in me as a person, because I guess like when you hire someone and they say, I'm a storyteller and I'm going to help you build your brand by telling stories, it's kind of it's like, okay, what does that mean, right? It's a bit of a tough one to take, but Santi took it and she was like, whatever she said, I'm buying. So I really am grateful for that, and I feel like Santi has always approached me with that attitude of like, Lorraine, you need to trust yourself because I trust you. You need to trust your process and not try to make your process look like other people's process. And it's the same with Dionysius. When I got promoted to the head of communications and PR, he was saying to me, because I was freaking out so much, I told you in the beginning that I don't like disappointing people. I don't like making people feel like, oh, that was a mistake, we shouldn't have brought her on. And so that was really weighing heavily on me, because it's that perfectionism again that I mentioned with Brené Brown. And Dionysius, I remember him just having a conversation with me and saying, Lorraine, I hired you, or rather, you got promoted because we know that you're the best person for this role. It's not that we want you to prove that you're the best person for the role. So I think it's very hard to mention one specific event without really just being like the entire team has just been amazing, and we have amazing leadership in the team.
Awesome. I like that. I like that one of the things that you're mentioning so much is about the team, because I think that is like the most important thing is that you have, because you cannot be a one-man show. You need a good team that's behind you and that you're in to make things really work. All right, fantastic. So let's switch tracks a little bit, because one of the things that I definitely want to talk to you about is the women in sports beyond the hashtag initiative. Right? I mean, you've been working so hard with that and being so successful with it. So one of the things that I would like to ask you is, what has been the most inspiring thing about that, working with that initiative, and what are the fundamental objectives that it's aiming to achieve?
I mean, firstly, with the women in sports beyond the hashtag, like even from the beginning, and it will always stay this way, we're trying to create tangible value. No matter what, that might change depending on, like, we don't know what might happen in the next 5 years or in the next 2 years. But so what it looks like, it might change, but the core value of it is just that we want to create tangible value. We don't want to just come and talk and talk and talk and then go home and then there's nothing, no sort of change being done or being seen. And maybe that's also the frustration, because I guess in a startup we have quick turnaround on things. Like if we decide we're doing something, we really go for it and we make it happen, and then we start to see the growth. Whereas like when you think about sports in general, it doesn't operate like that. Things are much slower. And so that has been a frustration point on my side, when I realized that we on our side, we have so many ambitious things that we want to contribute to the sports industry, especially from the women's perspective. And then you see that, okay, maybe things are not taking off as quickly as you'd hope. But on the bright side, though, I've loved all the conversations I've had with, I mean, we talked to everyone from like maybe when you think about Pato, who founded the Football is Everywhere magazine. to Nancy Hensley, who is part of Mercury 13. I mean, the spectrum is huge, and not just focusing on just the women, but also the airlines. When you think about Robert Villahan, who at the time was at Biko Häcken and is now at Tottenham Hotspur, we just have so many inspiring conversations, and to be able to be part of those conversations and to be able to also inspire, because I think one of my strengths in life, depending on how you look at it, is that I'm optimistic, but a bit too optimistic in a very I believe in miracles kind of thing, which in business can be off-putting. But I think that's something that I actually contribute, because in situations where a certain group of people have been at a disadvantage, you don't want just the next best realistic thing. You want the big thing, right? You want a bigger picture, something that everyone can throw themselves towards and put their energy towards. You want something that will bring take us out from what we're lacking and make us all focus on the possibilities, right? And so I think that has been sort of the highlight of working on the initiative, and also the workshops that we've been doing with certain rights holders and sports organizations within the women's sports space, and trying to help them optimize their commercial framework, all those things. Just the fact that we actually focus on what can we actually change, what can we actually do, how can we make an impact today versus in the next couple of years when we have more resources. So I think, does that answer your question, or did I just?
No, absolutely. It absolutely does.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I appreciate with that initiative is the ambition to be as concrete as possible. Not talking about what can we do in the future, or more talking about the future state of mind, but rather being focused here and now and seeing what is it that we need to be doing now to achieve what we want to achieve in the future. It's very easy for anyone to talk about what is going to happen in the future, but it's really difficult to say, okay, so this is what we want to happen. What do we need to be doing now to make that happen? So I think that's one of the really great things with that initiative, is that you're focusing on that, and the discussions are often around that topic, which I think is great. And there is always a lot of challenges and opportunities that you face when you're promoting something like this initiative for women's sports and gender equality. But are there any specific, when we're talking about that, are there any specific challenges and opportunities that you would like to highlight in this?
I think the challenge-wise is that change management, right? Going from everyone has always viewed women's sports as this thing, and now studies and consumer interest is showing that it could be this big thing, right? So bridging that, taking that conversation and bridging that gap from what was, what could be, and what are we actually doing, that has been a challenge, because different, the industry is made up of people, and not all people share the same conviction that women's sports should be getting as much attention as it is getting now. And as well, not everyone's good at having conversations. Sometimes I find that you go into a room and you're coming to discuss commercial strategy, and then we talk about all the other things that are wrong with women's sports, and then it's there's a lot to be done, but if we focus on this one that's in front of us and we try to solve that, we can do much more than trying to sort of solve anything. And I think it was Mother Teresa who was asked, because she got backlash back in the day, because people were saying, well, you're only focusing on the hospice and people that are dying. Don't you know that there's so many other issues in India? And then she said, well, if that's your burden and you feel that passionate about it, then you do something about that specific part, because on my side, I can only do my part. So I think if we all realize that we have the little narrow kind of roads that we can focus on and fix that, in the grand scheme of things, that will work out so much better. And also trying to not focus so much on the this is so bad and all the bad, terrible things that have happened, and trying to remain optimistic. Of course, be realistic and know what you're up against, but also trying to bring in that optimism, because I find that these conversations as well can be a bit draining when it's just we're all complaining and not really coming up with solutions. So that those two, I think, they're the biggest challenges of like, let's be concrete and try to solve something versus being abstract and talking about all the problems that exist. And also like everyone contribute as much as you can on the side that you can, because in the grand scheme of things, it will be it will all work together, and the sort of the sum of all of our individual actions will be much bigger than just one person trying to do everything. And then in terms of opportunities, I think right now, just who was it? I think it was Nancy Hensley who kept on saying, like, if you treated women's sports like a startup, you would realize just how much of it an investment opportunity it is. And so I think there's so many opportunities now, and I'm not going to talk about myself, but rather opportunities in the industry for other people, other women that want to join the industry and do something. There's plenty of opportunity there. When you think about technology, like women's sports is, I personally think, is at an advantage because they're booming at a time when everything is kind of there and ready. So if a sports club, for example, is tiny and has no resources, there's loads of social media channels that are free to use, loads of resources online. We've got ChatGPT, we've got Copilot on Edge, on Microsoft Edge. So there's so much that we could do with very limited resources that I personally believe that is why. And now, like, everyone's on their phone and on their cameras. So the fans themselves want to see more being done on women's side. So it's just all around, no matter how you look at it, things are really working out for the better because of where we are as a society.
Amazing stuff there. There's couple of things that I want to pick up on. The first one is like, and I agree with this, is that when whatever initiative you started, like if it's women in sports beyond the hashtag, or if it's actually a company, I think one of the key things that you're saying is that you need to keep the focus. Absolutely. Right? I mean, you can't do everything at once, and you can't say that your business will provide like solutions for everyone. And the same thing with an initiative like this. Absolutely. Focus on the one thing that you can actually solve and do that really well, and then hope that either someone else picks up the other pieces, or you can like pick up on them later on. Absolutely. But like keeping the focus, that is so very wisely put.
I keep naming so many people. I hope that everyone can keep up, but I read a lot and I love
But there's one thing, and you're mentioning that, like you're talking about the opportunities that are there that don't necessarily cost a fortune to sort of like to get things started. And let's pick up on that a little bit, because you're like creating this collaborative environment for the women in sports, and you're doing that through an online platform and events, and there's a lot of work put into that. But maybe, we'd love to share, right? We'd like to share things that we've learned to see, so others can learn from that. And can you maybe share something about the strategy to make this community happen?
I think there are a few different things involved. Firstly, it should be about the people. It should be about serving. Another one of my favorite quotes is actually by Albert Einstein, and he says, "Strive not to be a success, but to be of value." So sometimes we start off and we are focusing on so many, like the ambition of like, this is what I can get, this is what I want to achieve, I want to be on whichever magazine about sports, blah, 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 blah. And then that doesn't always bring much value to the people that you're trying to serve, right? So firstly, focusing on what is the goal, what is the value, and then keeping that focus. And for us, like I mentioned before, it was creating tangible value. And so knowing this then informs every single thing that we do afterwards. So one of the most important things with initiatives is that you shouldn't try to preempt the narrative, but you should rather let things unfold. And then as they unfold, take what you need to take from the unfolding of things to feed into your goal, right? So we talk about creating tangible value. When we first started, we were focusing on the visibility issue. So this statistic that everyone keeps quoting, 4% of global media coverage is for women's sports, and now it's increased to 15%. Some people are celebrating, some people are going only 15%. It depends on how you look at it. But on our side, because we were focusing on that, we started inviting loads of prominent women in sports and male allies and everyone to sort of come onto our platform so we can give them visibility and champion their missions and sort of give them that platform. So because it's hard to support something that you don't know exists, right? So that was the whole idea when we first started. But as we were going along, we realized that, okay, when it comes to actually the technology side of things and using data to inform your commercial decisions, most women's clubs are underfunded to start with. So they're not really looking at these things that on the men's side we're taking for granted, right? Because there's a budget for it. So it's like on the men's side, it gets done. So then we realized from the conversations that we're having, we're not seeing that many women, we're not seeing that many women's sports clubs. And so because we want to create tangible value, we started to focus on that. Okay, how can we create tangible value in this area? And so this is when we started looking at, okay, we'll bring in workshops so that more women's sports clubs and sports organizations can understand what we are all about, you know, because at the end of the day, we do have products that we know work, you know, that we have used for different sports clubs and organizations, from federations to leagues, that we know that these definitely work, and that on the women's side, they're not being used that much, right? And so then we started thinking, okay, so then how can we bridge that gap, since they don't have the funds, they don't have maybe the manpower, or rather human resources, to use a more gender neutral term. They don't have resources to be able to sort of start using the strategies and the technology and the resources that the men's side use. And we started the workshop, we started a program, Commercializing Women's Sports program, where clubs can be part of two workshops, and then a free audit, free consultation, all that kind of stuff, so that we can understand where they are on their journey with data. So to sort of summarize what I just said, it's like, firstly, focusing on the goal and keeping that goal in focus. Secondly, allowing the things to unfold and allowing whatever happens, whatever unfolds, to feed into your purpose, versus kind of like, okay, now we're talking about Web3, so we're going to abandon ship and focus on Web3, because now you're chasing trends, right? You're not focusing on your core strength. And again, we chose that goal because it was our core strength. It wasn't something that we were like, one day we might be able to do this. We said, what are we capable of doing right now? What are we able to do right now and do it very well? And that's where the creating tangible value came in. So yes, that was the strategy, and that will continue to be the strategy, because like I said earlier, we don't know what will happen in the next 3 years. We don't know what might happen in the next 10 years. We don't know what might happen tomorrow, right? But we will allow that to inform how we expand. And that's another thing. Don't expand too quickly, but also don't resist expansion. Because sometimes we focus on the wrong metrics. We go, okay, we've got 300 downloads on the podcast, or 1,000 downloads on the podcast, so it means this, and then we jump the gun. And then you have to go back again to the drawing board, because what you kind of did was not the right next step. So trying to take it step by step by step, and always focusing on the core goal as you take the next steps forward has been the strategy.
I think it's so many wise words. No, really. I mean, it's so interesting to hear. And I know that we could probably be talking about this for the rest of the episode, but I want still to shift gears a little bit, because we do need to touch on the fact that this is the 100th episode, right? And we're celebrating that of the Sports CDP Crash Course. So let's talk a little bit of your role as the podcast host. Would you just share like your secret sauce about the women's sport? So let's go into the secret sauce for actually delivering such engaging and informative content. And this is really interesting, because this is something you can actually measure, right? So it's not just us saying that, we're actually delivering something that is engaging.
Yeah.
we actually know because we can measure it, right? And the whole purpose is that we truly want to share what the things that we've learned and also learn from others. So I think it's great to see the engagement. But what has been your secret sauce when it comes to this?
Yes, I do think that this is the secret sauce. I do think so, because whenever like in the beginning, and it still continues till today, when I reach out to people for a podcast, they will ask me, what do you want me to talk about? And I always go, I don't want you to talk about anything. What do you want to talk about? And I think that's the powerful thing of when you tell someone this is what you should talk about, they will talk about it because that's what they should talk about. But they won't talk about it in a passionate, engaging way, because it's just something that they should do. And when it comes to podcasts, there is no video, so I can't watch your body language. I can't be distracted by, oh, those are nice drapes, so I kind of zone out. You're just listening to the person's voice, and you can hear passion. I don't know if people can hear this, but I personally, I think, yeah, you can hear this. Like when someone...
You can't see the body language that Lorraine is using, but I guarantee you it's there. So the passion is certainly there.
Exactly. And it's like when someone is excited to talk about something, they become more animated, they speak faster, they speak louder, they speak with a bit more kind of, it flows. They don't have to stop to think about, oh, what did I mean to say? What is that point? You know, there's just a flow to it. And if you allow people to bring their stories the way that they want to bring their stories, that is the secret. And also you have to want to know what they want to talk about as well, right? Because sometimes it's like you only listen so you can ask the next follow-up question, so then you miss an opportunity to ask that question that you hadn't planned for, but actually is much more interesting. So I think just genuinely being interested in what other people have to say is the secret. And this is so powerful because right now when you think about media, one of the things that the media gets backlash for is they sort of drive the narrative. They find the people that will affirm what they already want you to think. But when it comes to podcasts, I think this is where people can really, like storytellers, companies, brands, they can really stand out because they can allow people to sort of speak their minds. Now, that said, you also have to do it within certain boundaries, because we at Data Talks, we believe in inclusion, we believe in sort of supporting each other, we believe in uplifting versus tearing apart, right? So we wouldn't allow someone to come onto the podcast so that they can then talk bad about, oh, men don't support women, or women are the superior sex, whatever. You know, we would never have that because that's not a value that we have. So I just had to throw that in there, that allow people to speak their minds, but also it should be within sort of your own values as well, of like, this is wrong. You know, there are certain things that are like black and white, this is wrong, you shouldn't be saying that, so we would never entertain that. But other things are gray, and we're willing to talk about the gray and the colorful. Yes.
Fantastic. And one of the things that I now experience is this is my first time as a podcast host, is like there's like different stages to listening, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And it really requires you to deeply listening to whatever saying, because I mean you have the idea of how you want the episode to sort of, like the idea that it should follow, but at the same time, if you're not listening to the person and you're just asking the questions like what you're saying, then you're missing out on so many other stuff. So it's so interesting to hear you talk about this. And I think that goes for a lot of times in life where you need to like make sure you have the time to actually listen to whatever that person is saying. I mean, I think so that is it's a skill set, I would say.
It definitely is. Yeah.
So now, amongst all of these episodes, then is there one or couple, maybe, I don't know, that you would like to mention that they like left a profound impact on you, or in some way maybe contributed to your personal growth and development? Is there something like bits and pieces that you would like, or maybe a full episodes that you would like to sort of lift?
Yes, I think one of the one thing that all episodes that have sort of impacted me have in common is that everyone that was talking was very passionate about what they were doing. I remember talking to Lucy Mills, and at the end of that episode, or during the episode, I think I kind of was like, okay, now I need to ask this. And I was like, where do you find the time to do all of this? Like, you mentioned so many things that she's just like, I just love it. So I find time. So everything kind of, so that was the sort of the first time I sort of stopped and realized the importance of passion. And because you can't really fake it, you know, you can't really, you can, but it shows. Eventually, it shows that 1+1 is not 2, as I like to say. And also, Soline Al-Zubi, her favorite quote was "Follow your passion, and success will follow you." And I was like,
great quote.
Yeah. And she's so humble. I think that's one of the things that struck me about her, because she's achieved so much. She's now the head of women's football at the Malaysian Football Association. And she's just so humble. She's just so, I don't know. Do you know when it's just a person, you're talking to a person, you know? And I find people like that. Nick Meacham is the same way as well. He's one of the first CEOs that actually responded to my email when I said, I'd love to interview you. Now, maybe he might have been biased because I am part of the Sports Pro New Era program, so it would have been difficult to say no. But I'd love to think that's not why he said yes, right? So I think when you meet people that are highly accomplished, but that seem to be as human and as humble as just me and you, as just, it's like, this could be a friend, this could be a colleague, and there isn't that differentiation of like, I know more than you and I'm about to tell you all about it. Those are the most impactful ones. And I have to mention Nancy as well from Mercury 13, because again, it was that same thing, because I don't know, it's just because like sometimes you message people and the response isn't that great. So with her, I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. Like, it was amazing. She just laughs throughout the whole podcast. She's very generous with her spirit, is how I like to say it. So she doesn't just deliver the fact, but she delivers the fact in the way that she feels, you know? So if she's excited about something, you will see it and you will hear it. And I absolutely love those. Yeah. I just love it when, like, Stefan, one of my favorite things in life is just like the human connection, just because at work we can be so sterile sometimes. It's like, I'm here to do a job, I'm here to deliver, I'm here to do my branding. Other than that, don't try to get to know me, don't try to experience me. And I just think that that is not the way to go at all, because if we're going to spend 8 hours together, hopefully that 8 hours is filled with more than just the bottom line, but it's rather filled with like loads of excitement, loads of fun, loads of emotion, loads of, even when you have something to say, like it said, with compassion, it said, you know, I think that like work is a space that can really contribute more to people's lives than it actually is contributing at the moment.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And maybe it's like we're talking about this, the people behind the who you are, and finding that out is maybe also contributing to the bottom line. So just focusing on the bottom line, I don't think that is like the way to go. You'll certainly get like the bottom line, but you won't get it the way you want it.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting though that you're mentioning now going into the personal part of things, because now we talked about like your achievements. Let's talk a little bit more about you and who you actually are, right?
Yeah.
One thing that I would like to, and we actually touched on this in the beginning, we talked about celebrating.
Yeah.
Right, how difficult that can be.
Yeah.
But I mean, you've been successful. You've done some fantastic achievements. How have you celebrated this?
I'm really bad at celebrating, Stefan. So can I be cheeky and ask you, how have you celebrated your milestone? Because then I could learn a thing or two about celebrating, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. You know, then we have something in common that we definitely need to improve and definitely need to learn, is to celebrate more.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's like, yeah, I'm terrible. I'm terrible at celebrating. And the reason is you need to stop and reflect, right? Even on the good stuff, and not just saying, great, that went well, and then you move on to the next one. Because the way that the the human brain is wired, it's so much easier to focus on the bad things or the things that don't go well instead of focusing on the things that are positive and go well, right? So I think that's maybe one of the things. But then let's make a promise then.
Yes.
that will together we'll definitely be better at celebrating.
Absolutely, and then we can do episode 200 and then come back and it'll be all about celebration. But I want to touch on what you just said about the human thing. Like in another world, I would have studied like neuroscience and just sort of like an intersection between neuroscience and psychology, because I find it so fascinating how just our wiring makes us not do certain things. Because I think the reason, like for me anyway, I can only speak for myself, the reason I'm so not into celebrating is because there's a risk with celebrating, right? Because we're so primed for protection. We're wired to protect ourselves. So when you're afraid and the adrenaline, all that stuff, it's very natural for us to feel, because it's like you're enacting your protective side, right?
Yeah.
But then to stop and actually be like, this is good. There's no need to protect. It's just take it in, expand, be happy, and expect more of this. That's a very difficult thing, because it's easier to expect more of the bad stuff, because that's just, I mean, you see it everywhere, and we kind of expect that sometimes if we don't really work intentionally to be like, no, I'm not going to expect the bad, I'm going to expect the good as well, you know? You say the best is yet to come, but I would reckon like not that many people actually believe that.
That's
and
true.
I think I fall in that category of I just need to be better at being happy and being better at being at celebrating, be better at just taking in the good instead of always trying to strive for like, I'm going to improve this, I'm going to do that. Because yes, I will do it anyway, but wouldn't I rather do that while also being very happy and feeling very accomplished and feeling very excited?
Now, this is so interesting, because what we're talking about here is like the mental state, and maybe it's also a little bit about the mental health, right? So we're touching on a very like interesting topic here, and I think here we can learn a lot from the sports world, actually, right? I mean, if you think about sports and business is in many ways very similar to each other. One thing that's central in both is performance, right? But if you then in sports, if you start scratching the surface of the performance that's being made, then you see like it's a palette of different things that need to be in place to make it work. And one of the things is like you have to be in a mental state of mind that you sort of have that image of you being successful, which of course means that you need to be looking and seeing that, yes, so I won this race, or I scored that goal, or I made that deal, and I need to expect more of that. And that's so difficult, right? But I think if you listen to people in sports, I would say it's people in sports, not business. It's people in sports. If you listen to them, they've seen themselves be successful.
Exactly.
They visualized it, and so they're seeing themselves getting that Olympic gold around their neck. So they've seen that's something that's in my visual state of mind, and I will achieve that. And I think that can be very powerful.
Absolutely.
But then you're left with, then you have to believe that image.
Exactly.
And that's where you need to do the real work.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting, really interesting topics. So one last question, maybe two, but one last question. Could you, like what we're talking about, like more personal stuff. So are there any like hobbies or special skills that you're more passionate about when it comes to your personal life?
Yeah, I love stories. So I love reading. I love watching TV. I think TV is, something interesting about me that I've also yeah, that sounded very very humble. But did you know that you don't know this, but I'll just say, did you know anyway? Did you know that the reason I moved from Botswana, or I finally believed that it was possible for me to move from Botswana and pursue my dreams, was because at the time, this was 2012, a lady by the name Kerry Washington was playing, was the lead actress on Scandal. And Scandal was the first show in 20-something years, or maybe 13, something like that, years where a Black woman was actually in the lead. And so in my generation growing up, I didn't see any Black women in the lead in those roles. I would see them as like slaves. And since I'm not from the US, that is a bit removed from me. So it doesn't really resonate with me. And so when I saw Kerry Washington playing Olivia Pope, suddenly something inside of me was like, oh my gosh, this is possible. This is possible. And within a year, I went from, I can't really afford to move abroad to, okay, now I'm in a university in the UK, and universities in the UK are very, very expensive. So things happen like this when I suddenly believed. So that's why I believe so much in the power of like stories, because you don't just believe in a vacuum. You have to, sometimes it takes inspiration from seeing it from someone else. That's the importance of representation, right? That you see enough variety of people that look like you or that have something in common with you, because it doesn't, looking like you doesn't always, I believe, doesn't always mean like Black woman, that it can mean like, okay, this person's circumstances were similar to mine, even though they don't physically look like me. I feel like spiritually and emotionally, I really connect with that person, and seeing their success can trigger something inside of you. So that's why I'm always trying to tell stories, and trying to tell stories from the perspective of the people behind those stories versus from my perspective, because then you can really tap into that human spirit and tap into that inspiration. So stories of all formats. So poetry, I love writing poetry when I can't describe or explain or sort of process my emotions. I just write random like poetry, and just, yeah, so everything to do with stories. And then nature. I think nature, we have so much to learn from nature. Yeah, just being still, being present, being the real you, understanding seasons, you know, because if you look at a tree, I was going to do this, I didn't do it, but maybe one day I'll do it. I was going to pick one tree and then just observe that one tree every single day for a year and kind of see. Because when like all of the flowers have bloomed, it's obvious that it's spring, but they don't just bloom overnight, you know. The little signs that we miss throughout that show that, oh, this is going in that direction. And I think it's the same in our lives. Sometimes we're like, oh, we want to reach maybe $1 billion MRR or whatever. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what we want to do. But then we miss the signs, the little signs that show us that actually we are on that path, because we're waiting for the big thing, then we believe, right? So those little things, like, yeah, nature's so inspiring.
You know what? I think that was such a great ending to this, because I think it's you're putting it so wisely, and I also believe that things happen when you believe that they will happen. That's when you're in the right state of mind to push things. And also the last thing you're saying about the little signs, that's often how it happens. There's not the big bang, it's the little signs, and you need to pick up on them. And then we're back to the celebrating part. You don't just celebrate the big things, you should celebrate the small things.
Exactly.
Like, it's so important.
Yeah.
I actually had one more question, but you know what? That was such a great ending, so I'm going to leave it.
Wonderful.
And just I want to thank you so much, Lorraine. First of all, I want to thank you for being on the team. That's most important. So thank you for that. And of course, like, huge thanks for making the Sports CDP Crash Course such a great resource for data talks, and also all the amazing work you've done with the women in sports beyond the hashtag. But mainly for being on the team.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be in the team, and now we start on the other side of 2 years.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Nice.
Yes.